Welcome back. Today we're going to be finishing up Elihu's speech. It's 3 more chapters, and then starting with the next session, hold on to your hat for God's response. So, Job 36 verses 1 through 4 says, "And Elihu continued and said, 'Bear with me a little, and I will show you, for I have yet something to say on God's behalf. I will get my knowledge from afar and ascribe righteousness to my Maker. For truly my words are not false. One who is perfect in knowledge is with you.'" Wow, doesn't he sound like a bag of gas? Anyway, he asks him, keep listening. I have more to say on God's behalf. Isn't that presumptuous? Is he seeing that they're getting a little impatient with him, that maybe he's talking a little too long? Notice he says, "Bear with me a little." He's saying, I'll be short. He won't be. It's an example today is a pastor that says, "In closing," and then it goes on for another 20 minutes. There's a story about a man who talked to Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. He talked a long time, and then he apologized for troubling him so long. Aristotle told him, "Oh, you haven't troubled me at all because I haven't listened to a word you said." Verse 4a, this could be read to say, "In speaking truth, which you and the others have not." I would be very irritated with this young man at this point. Verses 5 through 12 say, "Behold, God is mighty and does not despise any. He is mighty in strength of understanding. He does not keep the wicked alive, but gives the afflicted their right. He does not withdraw his eyes from the righteous, but with kings on the throne he sets them forever, and they are exalted. And if they are bound in chains and caught in the cords of affliction, then he declares to them their work and their transgressions, that they are behaving arrogantly." Arrogantly. "He opens their eyes to instruction and commands that they return from iniquity. If they listen and serve him, they complete their days in prosperity and their years in pleasantness. But if they do not listen, they perish by the sword and die without knowledge." So this strophe is more stuff about God's justice, his perfect justice. In this perfect justice, God punishes the wicked and works for the oppressed. True, but not always here on earth. And still, this doesn't apply to Job. But he makes a dig at Job. According to Elihu, God doesn't ignore the righteous. The righteous are exalted, and if the righteous are bound, God sets them free. Well, none of that's happening to Job. So according to Elihu, Job is not righteous. What do you think about verses 10 through 12? He opens their ears to instruction and commands that they return from iniquity. If they listen and serve him, they complete their days in prosperity and their years in pleasantness. But if they do not listen, they perish by the sword and die without knowledge. Do you think this is true today? There are those that would preach that if you're living a righteous life, you will be prosperous. And by prosperous, they're talking about you'll have money. You'll have everything taken care of. But is that true? Not necessarily. God chooses who to make prosperous here on this earth, and there are so many that are righteous in him that are not prosperous at all. So no, this is not true. Verses 13 through 15 say, "The godless in heart cherish anger. They do not cry for help when he binds them. They die in youth, and their life ends among the cult prostitutes. He delivers the afflicted by their affliction and opens their ear by adversity." Verse 13, does your version say hypocrite? If so, what does God do to them? Elihu thought Job was a hypocrite because he continued to deny his guilt. he paints a pretty bleak future for Job. Job is probably sitting there thinking, how could it get any worse? The only thing left is for him to die. And for him to die, that would not make things worse. He's asked, please let me die. Verse 14 talks about cult prostitutes, or yours may say perverted persons. This includes whores, harlots, prostitutes, sodomites. So he's saying that if you are not a hypocrite, if you are a hypocrite, you're going to end up living your life with the lowliest of people. Verses 16 through 21 say, He also allured you out of distress into a broad place where there was no cramping, and what was set on your table was full of fatness. But you are full of the judgment on the wicked. Judgment and justice seize you. Beware lest wrath entice you into scoffing, and let not the greatness of the ransom turn you aside. Will your cry for help avail to keep you from distress, or all the force of your strength? Do not long for the night when peoples vanish in their place. Take care, do not turn to iniquity, for this you have chosen rather than affliction. Elihu talks about what God would have done if Job had only repented. He'd be out of distress, and he'd be treated like a rich man with a lot of room and an abundant table. So it seems like the poor lived in crowded conditions. Is that true today? Very much so. For Elihu, Job's problems are easy to diagnose. Job didn't have the blessings God gives to the obedient and repentant. Therefore, Job was not obedient and repentant. Verse 19 says, so there's other versions that say, will your riches, instead of will your cry for help. This assumes what a lot of people assume, that rich people trust in their riches. It may often be true, but not always. And certainly not true for Job. Basically, he's saying all the suffering and agony, it's your choice. You could change it anytime you want. Just repent. Verse 22 through 25 says, Behold, God is exalted in his power. Who is a teacher like him? Who has prescribed for him his way? Or who can say, you have done wrong? Remember to extol his work, of which men have sung. All mankind has looked on it. Man beholds it from afar. So there's kind of a change in Elihu's tone here. It seems that there's a storm approaching, and it's a rainstorm with wind and thunder and dark clouds. And Elihu is taking inspiration from this. So he tones down the scorn. What he doesn't know, and we'll find out in chapter 38, is that the Lord is in this storm. So picture this next strophe as this storm is brewing. 26 through 33 says, Behold, God is great, and we know him not. The number of his years is unsearchable, for he draws up the drops of water. They distill his mist and rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. Can anyone understand the spreading of the clouds, the thunderings of his pavilion? Behold, he scatters his lightning about him and covers the roots of the sea. For by this he judges people. He gives food in abundance. He covers his hands with the lightning and commands it to strike the mark. Its crashing declares his presence. The cattle also declare that he rises. So, this begins a truthful and powerful argument. The problem is the argument is based on the premise that Job has committed a powerful sin against God. There's a lot of great principle in here, but wrong application. He does a really great job analyzing the water cycle. In fact, some people say that this is proof that Job had to be written much later than Abraham's time because of these advanced concepts. But if they are inspired, it could have been written anytime God wanted it written. In these verses, we see that the rain can both be used to bless men and curse men. Think about how it can bless men or curse men. Agriculturally, we need rain. We need rain to grow our crops. In a way, it curses us. Right now in southern Utah, we are having, and in all of Utah and Northern California and all over the place, we are having record snowfall, record rain. The snowfall limits are incredible, and we're waiting for that snow to start melting. We're going to get 80-degree weather this weekend, and that snow may start melting quickly and turn into water. And where is that water going to go? Flooding is anticipated. That's a way that rain can curse men. This strophe ends with a statement on how cattle can sense a storm long before it gets there. So as we're going through chapter 37, again, picture the thunderstorm. It's very possible that the storm is happening right as Elihu is speaking. So Job 37 verses 1 through 5 says, "At this also my heart trembles and leaps out of its place. Keep listening to the thunder of his voice and the rumbling that comes from his mouth. Under the whole heaven he lets it go, and his lightning to the corners of the earth. After it his voice roars, he thunders with majestic voice, and he does not restrain the lightnings when his voice is heard. God thunders wondrously with his voice. He does great things that we cannot comprehend." What is your reaction when you sense God's power? When have you sensed God's power? Think about that time. Elihu thinks Job needs a really good dose of the greatness of God. Again, great advice, but doesn't apply to Job. What better sound really gives you a picture of God's power and majesty than thunder? Psalm 29 has a magnificent description of the thunderstorm. "The voice of the Lord is over the waters. The God of glory thunders, the Lord over many waters. The voice of the Lord is powerful. The voice of the Lord is full of majesty. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon." Now we get the blizzard. Maybe the temperature's dropping. Verses 6 through 13 says, "For the snow," he says, "fall on the earth. Likewise to the downpour, his mighty downpour. He seals up the hand of every man, that all men whom he made may know it. Then the beasts go into their lairs and remain in their dens. From its chamber comes the whirlwind, and cold from the scattering winds. By the breath of God ice is given, and the broad waters are frozen fast. He loads the thick cloud with moisture. The clouds scatter his lightning. They turn around and around by his guidance to accomplish all that he commands them on the face of the habitable world. Whether for correction or for his land or for love, he causes it to happen." God spoke the world into existence. And Elihu carries on more about how God's voice commands the weather. Think about how men and animals are affected by this weather. Verse 7 is the idea that when God sends the cold and the snow, the farmer can't do their work. His hand is sealed from further work. Charles Spurgeon said, "When they cannot do their own work, they are intended to observe the works of God." Is that what happens when you can't work, when you can't accomplish things? Do you focus on God? Not many people do. Verse 12, God controls nature for his purposes. So the gist of this is that Elihu believes that unrepentant Job should submit to God the same way his creation does. Verses 14 through 18. Hear this, O Job, stop and consider the wondrous works of God. Do you know how God lays his command upon them and causes the lightnings of his cloud to shine? Do you know the balancings of the clouds, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge? You whose garments are hot, when the earth is still because of the south wind. Can you, like him, spread out the skies, hard as a cast metal mirror? So verse 14 has three imperatives, orders. Hear, stop, and consider. Notice all the "do you know" phrases. This is very similar to how God will be addressing Job. They're meant to be rhetorical questions. Elihu is saying, if you can't even understand how God works in nature, how can you understand his providence? Job, you're ignorant. Verse 17, when the wind doesn't blow, the weather is warm and your clothes are dry, is what this verse is talking about. Verse 18 is saying, talk about mirrors. Mirrors in those days were made from polished bronze. The better you polished them, the better reflection you got. They believed that the ancient sky was a dome of bronze. So it was like a mirror. Verses 19 through 24 says, teach us what we will say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of darkness. Shall it be told him that I would speak? Did a man ever wish that he would be swallowed up? And now no one looks on the light when it is bright in the skies, or when the wind has passed and cleared them. Out of the north comes gold and splendor. God is clothed with awesome majesty. The Almighty, we cannot find him. He is great in power, justice, and abundant righteousness he will not violate. Therefore, men fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in their own conceit. Elihu is reminding him that Job, that he will speak on behalf of Job to God. Job's saying, or Elihu's saying, if you dare to think you could meet with God, tell us, what would you say? Didn't Job already say what he was planning to say to God? In verse 21, Elihu is talking about how God is so bright we can't approach him, that he's like the sun. Imagine Job's loneliness. He's standing there silent. No one's sympathizing with him. They're throwing insults at him. They're calling him a heretic and blasphemous. So this is where Elihu's speech ends. Have you ever heard someone say when they meet God, they're going to ask him this or that? What do you think is really going to happen when you meet the Almighty, glorious, awesome God? Over the last 35 chapters, through all this talking, God hasn't been part of the conversations. We didn't see God's direct role in comforting or speaking to Job in the middle of this. Over this time, Job has ached over and over again for a word from God. The next session, we're going to hear from God. Thank you for joining me, and Remember to click like if you have enjoyed this session, and consider subscribing if you'd like to be notified of future sessions. Thank you.